Imagine holding a single penny between your fingers and realizing that this tiny disc, nearly 2 millimeters thick and just 19 millimeters across, could be worth more than your morning coffee. For some, it has paid for entire vacations. That's exactly the intrigue wrapped up in the 1969 Lincoln cent. On its face, it looks like countless others. Abraham Lincoln's profile, gazing right, the date stamped clearly beneath. But for a rare few, minute variations in the way it was struck have turned an everyday 1 cent piece into a legend among collectors, commanding 5 and 6 figure prices. Let's dive into the world of a 1969 Lincoln cent, exploring how its origins, quirks, and market journey transformed it from pocket change into sought-after treasure. The Lincoln cent first appeared in 1909, celebrating the centennial of Lincoln's birth with a design by Victor David Brenner. That original wheat ear reverse gave way in 1959 to the Lincoln Memorial design, immortalizing not only our 16th president on the obverse, but also the grand monument on the reverse. By 1969, the United States was deep into the Vietnam War, the Apollo missions were capturing imaginations, and the mint was churning out millions of those memorial cents in a familiar composition of 95% copper, 5% tin, and zinc. The production process relied on hubs and dies. A hub imprinted the design onto a working die, which then struck coin blanks under immense pressure. Occasionally, slight misalignments or underpressings created doubled details or missing elements, errors that normally would be caught and destroyed. But every so often a few slipped through quality control and into circulation. Most 1969 cents in change today are the typical red-brown color, worn smooth by millions of exchanges. You might pay only a few cents above face value to a dealer for an average, unremarkable example. But among these millions lurk rare variants. The most famous is the 1969 S double die obverse. Instead of a crisp single outline of Lincoln's profile, you'll see faint echoes of the date and letters, tiny shadows doubling in God We Trust, the date 1969, and even parts of the word liberty. It's as if the first strike, missed by a hair, then the hub pressed again, slightly askew, cutting a ghost image into the metal. Only the San Francisco Mint produced this variety, and only a few dozen survived. Spotting one takes a loop and a trained eye. You'll examine Lincoln's shoulder, where the double die often shows up most dramatically, a second contour line running parallel to the first, sometimes referred to as a shadow. Check the serifs of the lettering. If they look thickened or fuzzy, you may have doubling. The date numerals, especially the 9S, reveal tiny offset loops or extra flicks. Even seasoned collectors sometimes miss these subtle signs, which is why certified examples, those encased in protective slabs by grading services, can fetch eye-popping sums. Auction houses have spun legend around 1969, S double die obverse. In 2008, a single specimen in mint state conditions sold for over $125,000. Collectors still talk about that sale as the moment when the penny-era world exploded into mainstream numismatic fascination. In subsequent years, similar coins have sold for tens of thousands, depending on grade. A virtually flawless MS-66 example can climb north of $70,000, while an MS-64 might still bring in $50,000 or more. It's remarkable that a coin worth 1 cent originally could ever eclipse 6 figures, but that's the power of scarcity combined with collector passion. Yet, not all 1969 era cents reach that stratosphere. A more modest variety, known as the Floating Roof Memorial, shows a slight gap beneath the roofline of the Lincoln Memorial where the die failed to fully strike. It looks as though the roof is hovering above the columns by a hair's breadth. These coins are easier to find than the double die obverse, yet still rare enough that an uncirculated example in the low mint state grades might command a few $100s. In circulated condition, you might see values from $20 to $50, still impressive for a penny. Condition plays a massive role. In circulated grades labeled good through extremely fine, a typical brown 1969 Lincoln cent might be worth a few cents to $1 based on the depth of wear and remaining luster. An EF40 with all major details visible but obvious where could fetch around 25 cents to a dollar, and negative 50 Australian dollars with slight traces of friction on high points, but nearly full detail, might reach close to $5 if the strike is strong and the color appealing. Enter the uncirculated realm with grades MS60 through MS63, and values jump to $2 to $10 for red-brown pieces. At MS64, serious collectors chase red specimens marked RD, where you might see $20 to $50. Push into MS65 RD, and you're in the three-figure zone. MS66 RD examples, virtually impossible to find, can climb into the thousands. Beyond doubling and floating roof varieties, other anomalies draw interest. Some 1969 cents lack the designer's initials FG for Francesboro beneath Lincoln's shoulder. Others show weak or missing mint marks. In rare cases, overpunching occurred. You can find faint traces of an earlier mint mark beneath the stamped S. Even subtle die cracks, tiny raised lines where the die fractured, can catch a specialist's eye if they form intriguing patterns around the rim or across Lincoln's cheek. These varieties don't just represent monetary value. They embody stories of human oversight, mechanical quirks, and the unpredictable journey from press to pocket. Consider a mint worker in San Francisco loading blanks for the hubbing press. A slight misalignment, perhaps just a fraction of a millimeter, and thousands of coins carry that imperfection. Quality control teams later separate obvious errors, but the borderline pieces, those with faint doubling, may slip by. A roll of pennies lands at a bank, is spent at a coffee shop, and eventually someone spots the odd shadow under trust. A collector's heart races. They research, they submit it for grading, and suddenly that forgotten cent becomes a star. The market for these coins thrives on that drama. Specialist dealers chase undiscovered examples in estate collections and old coin rolls. Auction catalogs highlight dramatic doubling and exceptional eye appeal, commanding premiums. Grading services assign precise numeric grades, with each half-point jump yielding significant price increases. Forums buzz with images of slabs bearing grades like MS65 RD DDR, deep dye doubling combined with red color. Conventions host error coin tables where dealers spread out trays of oddities under bright lights while buyers inspect with magnifiers. Yet for every spectacular sale, countless collectors enjoy the hunt without ever landing the six-figure prize. Finding a modest floating roof 1969D in negative 55 Australian dollars for $50 still delivers a thrill. Comparing two similarly graded coins side by side, one with crisp columns on the memorial reverse, the other with slight softness, that subtle difference in strike can mean a tenfold value gap. Learning to discern die states, patina variations, and strike quality becomes a lifelong pursuit. Even if your collection focuses on tone brown circulated pieces, tracking how color shifts from red to brown over decades adds a layer of aesthetic appreciation beyond raw dollars. Many collectors also cherish the narrative. How copper prices peaked in the 1960s, nearly prompting the mint to change metal composition. How the San Francisco Mint's error went unrecognized until collectors brought examples to grading services years later. How a simple penny, intended to cost 1 cent to produce, briefly became worth more in metal value alone. Those ironies enrich each specimen. A 1969 cent might bear microscopic scratches or faint bag marks, reminders of its circulation life, or it might gleam with original red luster as if yesterday's strike. Right when you thought pennies couldn't get any more interesting, 1982 flipped the script on America's smallest coin. That was the year the mint quietly changed the metal recipe from solid copper to a thin copper plating over a zinc core, an economic decision driven by soaring copper prices. Overnight, collectors found themselves sorting two completely different coins, both marked 1982. Some retained the classic 95% copper composition. Others showed a silver-gray edge where the copper layer hugged the zinc center. That split created a whole new realm of rarity and error possibilities. So let's peel back the layers on the 1982 Lincoln cent, revealing why it's become a modern-day treasure hunt. Picture the mint in early 1982. Copper hitting record-high costs, Treasury officials watching melt values inch above face value, and production teams scrambling to adapt dyes and metal feeds. The solution was to strike copper-plated zinc cents, 97.5% zinc with a 2.5% copper flash, starting mid-year. But in the chaos of transition, both copper and zinc planchets ran through the presses. The result? Two finite populations of 1982 cents, the old copper type and the new zinc type. And because the mint didn't note the changeover on packaging, collectors had to discover these varieties the hard way by looking at edges, weighing coins, or spotting that bright silver gleam where copper should be. On the face of it, the copper and zinc 1982 cents look identical. Lincoln's bust, the date, "In God We Trust," and the word liberty remain the same shapes. The reverse still bears the Lincoln Memorial. But the moment you catch sight of a pale gray ring around the edge, you know you've got a zinc core piece. If you hold it on edge to the light, the layered structure becomes unmistakable like a tiny sandwich. Weigh 1 on a precision scale. Copper types tip the balance at about 3.11 grams, zinc types at 2.50 grams. That 0.61 gram gap is the smoking gun. Which of these is rarer? It depends where you look. Early estimates suggested copper 1982 pennies accounted for roughly 35% of mintage before the switch, with zinc making up the rest. But because copper cents continue to be used in circulation longer before people realize their significance, far fewer survive today in high grades. A pristine copper 1982 in mint state, say MS65 red-brown, can command $30 to $50. By contrast, a comparable zinc MS65 RD piece might fetch $5 to $10. But when you push into top-tier grades, MS66 and above, the copper variants become dramatically scarcer, with MS66 RB pieces selling for hundreds. Collectors chase that copper DNA like geneticists hunting a rare allele, because each red copper cent is a direct link to the pre-1982 era. Errors in the zinc-plated series add another twist. Some planchets received an incomplete copper coating, producing off-center copper rings or broad bands of exposed zinc. Others went through with lamination splits, where the copper layer flakes away, creating ghostly patches of gray amid the red fields. In extreme cases, you'll find copper-zinc transitional coins with thick copper flash, so heavy it peels in sheets. Those dramatic errors, though fewer in number, can fetch $100 to $300 in mid-grade uncirculated and skyrocket higher if the misapplication is bold and visually striking. Then there are the double die varieties. Though less celebrated than the 1969 double die, a handful of 1982 double die obverse slipped through on both copper and zinc planchets. The doubling shows most clearly on the date, and the motto, "Look for shadowed outlines on the numerals 1, 9, and 8, and doubling on the letters of trust." Because these dies were used on both planchet types, you can find both copper double dies and zinc double dies, each with its own collector base. A copper double die in MS64 RD might bring $150, while the zinc version in the same grade goes for $50 to $75. Interest spiked when a few extreme off-center strikes appeared. Some were so misaligned that Lincoln's profile nearly danced off the planchet, leaving a crescent of blank metal. Off-center strikes on zinc cents often expose the raw zinc core on one side, creating a flattering two-tone effect. Collectors value these by the degree of off-center. 10% misalignment might fetch $10 in uncirculated, 50% misalignment could hit $200 or more. Copper off-centers, however, regularly break the $500 mark simply because they're rarer survivors. Stories swirl around these pieces. One collector bought a jar of 1982 pennies from a bank, and using a magnetic separator, copper is non-magnetic, zinc is slightly attracted, pulled out a mix bag of over 200 copper core cents, an unprecedented haul. Among them, he found 2 MS66 RB gems. He later sold them for $600 apiece. Another dealer, sifting through eBay purchases, spotted a zinc cent with a dramatic lamination error that looked like molten metal peeling. He turned it into a social media sensation and sold it for $1,200. Those stories underscore how chance and persistence can pay off, sometimes literally. Condition remains king. For circulated zinc, 1982. DS, you might pay face value up to 50 cents, depending on wear and color. A negative 55 Australian dollars zinc cent could go for $1 to $2, MS60, MS63 for $2 to $6. Copper types start at a few dollars in low mint states and climb rapidly. MS64RB for $10 to $20, MS65RB $30 to $50, MS66RB $100 to $200. The rare MS67RD examples, only a handful known, sell for $500 to $1,000. Compare that to a zinc MS67RD, where few more survive and values rest around $150 to $200. Every half grade is a mini lottery ticket. The slightest bump in grade can double the price. Beyond planchet types and errors, 1982 cents showcase other oddities. You can find die cracks radiating from the rim into the fields, often near Lincoln's cheek, a subtle raised line that in multiples forms spiderweb patterns. Some exhibit die chips, tiny metallic blobs where a piece of die broke away. Collectors prize those as personality markers, especially if they repeat across multiple coins, signaling a specific die's lifespan. Mint mark repunches occur too, remnants of an initial D under a bolder D on Denver strikes, visible only under magnification. These micro varieties often trade in the $20 to $50 range in uncirculated grades. The metal switch also sparked controversies. Some argued the zinc core made pennies too brittle. Others claimed the thin copper plating wore off, exposing dull, gray metal unappealing to the public. Lobbyists suggested eliminating the penny altogether, pointing to production costs exceeding face value when copper was high. Yet collectors embraced the new variety, cementing 1982 as one of the most actively hunted dates. Annual price guides now list separate lines for 1982 copper and 1982 zinc, each with subentries for errors and grades, a reflection of how deeply the market recognizes the bifurcation. For a script narrator, that means drama at every turn. You can describe the thrill of weighing planchets on a digital scale, the surprise of finding a silver-edged penny in a pocket roll, the suspense as a suspected error goes to grading, and the exhilaration when it returns slabbed as MS65RD DDR or 50% off-center. Each coin carries a mini-drama of human choices, economic policy forcing metal change, technicians adjusting press pressures, collectors sorting and grading, and auctioneers narrating the hammer. As our journey through the 1982 Lincoln Cent draws to a close, remember, every roll is a chance encounter with history. That silent switch from copper to zinc represents a moment when policy, economics, and technology intersected on a microscopic stage. The next time you handle a penny, look beyond its face value. In that moment of inspection, seeing the edge, feeling the weight, spotting a doubled 9 or a peeled copper patch, you connect with a story far richer than 1 cent. And that more than any auction record is the true value of these remarkable coins.